Hello, this is Krystal Stanich, and thank you for joining me for this week's First Chapter Friday. Today I will be reading from the beginning of Nora Roberts' Island of Flowers. Chapter 1. Lane's arrival at Honolulu International Airport was traditional. She would have preferred to melt through the crowd, but it appeared traveling tourist class categorized her as just that. Golden-skinned girls with ivory smiles and vivid sarongs bestowed brilliant-colored leis. Accepting both kiss and floral necklace, Lane wove through the milling crowd and searched for an information desk. The girth of a fellow passenger hampered her journey. His yellow and orange flowered shirt and the twin cameras that joined the lei around his neck attested to his determination to enjoy his vacation. Under different circumstances, his appearance would have nudged at her humor. But the tension in Lane's stomach stifled any amusement. She had not stood on American soil in 15 years. The ripe land with cliffs and beaches that she had seen as the plane descended brought no sense of homecoming. The America Lane pictured came in sporadic patches of memory and through the perspective of a child of 7. America was a gnarled elm tree guarding her bedroom window. It was a spread of green grass where buttercups scattered gold. It was a mailbox at the end of a long, winding lane. But most of all, America was the man who had taken her to imaginary African jungles and desert islands. However, there were orchids instead of daisies. The graceful palms and spreading ferns of Honolulu were as foreign to Lane as the father she had traveled half the world to find. It seemed a lifetime ago that divorce had pulled her away from her roots. Lane felt a quiet desperation that the address she had found among her mother's papers would lead to emptiness. The age of the small, creased piece of paper was unknown to her. Neither did she know if Captain James Simmons still lived on the island of Kauai. There had only been the address tossed in among her mother's bills. There had been no correspondence, nothing to indicate the address was still a vital one. To write to her father was the practical thing to do, and Lane had struggled with indecision for nearly a week. Ultimately, she had rejected a letter in favor of a personal meeting. Her hoard of money would barely see her through a week of food and lodging, and though she knew the trip was impetuous, she had not been able to prevent herself. Threading through her doubts was the shimmering strand of fear that rejection waited for her at the end of her journey. There is no reason to expect anything else, she lectured herself. Why should the man who had left her fatherless during her growing up years care about the woman she had become? Relaxing the grip on the handle of her handbag, Lane reasserted her vow to accept whatever waited at her journey's end. She had learned long ago to adjust to whatever life offered. She concealed her feelings with the habit developed during her adolescence. Quickly, she adjusted the white, soft-brimmed hat over a halo of flaxen curls. She lifted her chin. No one would have guessed her underlying anxiety as she moved with unconscious grace through the crowds. She looked elegantly aloof in her inherited traveling suit of ice blue silk, altered to fit her slight figure rather than her mother's ample curves. The girl at the information desk was deep in an enjoyable conversation with a man. Standing to one side, Lane watched the encounter with detached interest. The man was dark and intimidatingly tall. Her pupils would undoubtedly have called him Sedouissant. His rugged features were surrounded by black hair and curling disorder, while his bronzed skin proved him no stranger to the Hawaiian sun. There was something rakish in his profile, some basic sensuality that Lane recognized but did not fully comprehend. She thought perhaps his nose had been broken at one time, But rather than spoiling the appeal of the profile, the lack of symmetry added to it. His dress was casual, the jeans well worn and frayed at the cuffs, and a denim work shirt exposed a hard chest and corded arms. Vaguely irritated, Lane studied him. She observed the easy flow of charm, the indolent stand at the counter, the tease of a smile in his mouth. I've seen his type before, she thought, with a surge of resentment, hovering around Vanessa like a crow around Kieran. She remembered, too, that when her mother's beauty had become only a shadow, the flock had left for younger prey. At that moment, Lane could feel only gratitude that her contact with men had been limited. He turned and encountered Lane's stare. One dark brow rose as he lingered over his survey of her. She was too unreasonably angry with him to look away. The simplicity of her suit shouted its exclusiveness, revealing the tender elegance of young curves. The hat half shaded a fragile, faintly aristocratic face with well-defined planes, straight nose, unsmiling mouth, and morning sky eyes. Her lashes were thick and gold, and he took them as too long to be authentic. He assessed her as a cool, self-possessed woman, recognizing only the borrowed varnish. Slowly, and with deliberate insolence, he smiled. Lane kept her gaze steady and struggled to defeat a blush. The clerk, seeing her companion's transfer of attention, shifted her eyes in Lane's direction and banished a scowl. "May I help you?" Dutifully, she affixed her occupational smile. Ignoring the hovering male, Lane stepped up to the counter. "Thank you. I need transportation to Kauai. Could you tell me how to arrange it?" A whisper of France lingered in her voice. "Of course. There's a charter leaving Kauai in..." The clerk glanced at her watch and smiled again. 20 minutes. "I'm leaving right now." Lane glanced over and gave the loitering man a brief stare. She noted that his eyes were as green as Chinese jade. "No use hanging around the airport, and," he continued as his smile became a grin, "my cub's not as crowded or expensive as the charter." Lane's disdainful lift of brow and dismissing survey had been successful before, but did not work this time. "Do you have a plane?" she asked coldly. "Yeah, I've got a plane." His hands were thrust in his pockets, and in his slouch against the counter, he still managed to tower over her. "I can always use the loose change from picking up island hoppers." "Dylan," the clerk began, but he interrupted her with another grin and a jerk of his head. "Rose will vouch for me. I run for Canyon Airlines on Kauai." He presented Rose with a wide smile. She shuffled papers. "Dylan, Mr. O'Brien, is a fine pilot." Rose cleared her throat and sent Dylan a telling glance. "If you'd rather not wait for the scheduled charter, I can guarantee that your flight will be equally enjoyable with him." Studying his irreverent smile and amused eyes, Lane was of the opinion that the trip would be something less than enjoyable. And if you would like to know what happens next, you can check this title out on the Libby app. Please join me here next week as I read from the beginning of Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. Thank you and have a great week. And that's actually in 2 weeks. I don't know if I said next week. It's in 2 weeks. Thanks and have a great Mother's Day.